Hello and welcome to our roundup of the European Parliament's latest plenary session here in Strasbourg. Among the big issues, Syria, what to do about the major humanitarian crisis there, climate change, MEPs approved a UN climate deal and discussed the follow-up, the Greek debt crisis, and an upcoming EU summit set to discuss EU-Russia relations and trade. Let's begin with Syria. Syria has been mired in a bloody civil war for over 5 years now and is in the midst of a major humanitarian crisis. The city of Aleppo is under daily siege from indiscriminate bombing. In a statement, EPP Group Chairman Manfred attacked Russia's President Vladimir Putin and the French National Front's Marine Le Pen for being an apologist for him.
The situation in Syria is a total disaster. And we have to face that this disaster is also created by the military intervention of Putin, of the Russians. That's why we have to put on the table the general question how we work with Russia. We have forces in Europe like Le Pen, like Wilders, all the right extremist parties in the European who are strongly in favor of Putin, who are strongly linked with the Russians. And I have to ask them, are you in favor that they are bombing now children in Aleppo? You are part of the problem.
Next, climate change. A major UN deal was agreed in Paris in December last year. Less than a year on, MEPs have given it their go-ahead. In a plenary session, the European Parliament approved the Paris United Nations Climate Change Agreement that EU ministers endorsed last week. It is now up to individual EU countries to formally ratify the deal. The UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon addressed MEPs in plenary before the vote.
On the importance of Europe's ratification of the Paris Agreement on climate change, I deeply appreciate your leadership and engagement. The European Union has a long and proud record of leadership on climate change.
EPP Group Chairman Manfred praised the EU's role too.
We led really the negotiations on a global level, and that's why Europe can be proud of the contribution to this agreement.
EPP Group MEP Giovanni La Via wrote the report on the Paris climate deal.
I'm very proud that we have achieved a good result in terms of vote, but also because we are starting the process of the Paris Agreement here in the House of European Citizens.
EU governments will be heading to Marrakesh in November for a new round of climate talks with countries like the US, India and China. Giovanni La Via explained what happens next.
Now in Marrakesh we are going to implement what we have agreed in Paris. The process in the European Union is started, and now we are going to have on our tables a lot of legislative files related to the Paris Agreement. We are discussing on emission trading system, we are discussing about the circular economy package, but also on effort sharing, how we are going to share the commitment taken in Paris.
Greece now, where the economy is still very reliant on external loans and where the government seems reluctant to implement agreed reforms. Greece has been enacting reforms to get its economy back on track in exchange for loans from the EU and the International Monetary Fund since 2010. This is part of a financial assistance programme agreed between the Greek government and its creditors. However, progress with reforms seems to have stalled, with a new deadline for freeing up loans coming up at the end of October. Asked if the government was doing enough to fulfil agreements that it has signed up to, EPP group member Georgios Kyrtsos said,
"The government has to become more consistent. They sign the necessary documents, but they do not always implement the policy."
He went on to give an example of this.
The minister responsible for the economy, Mr. Tsakalotos, has signed an over-ambitious plan for privatizations for the next 99 years. But speaking in the Greek parliament and addressing the people that vote for Syria, the radical left-wing party, he promised not to implement privatization as long as he remains a member of this government.
MEP group member Burkhard Balz clearly set out his expectations of the Greek government going forward.
eine ernsthafte, glaubwürdige und umfassende Umsetzung der vereinbarten Reformen.
And finally, Russia, trade and possibly Brexit are all set for discussion at an EU summit on the 21st and 22nd of October. Speaking in plenary, European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker stressed the importance of trade and talked of an upcoming trade negotiation.
We have to make sure that the agreement with Canada will enter into force after a certain number of months.
Also in plenary, EPP Group Chairman Manfred set out a red line in relation to Brexit negotiations. The UK has said it will trigger an exit clause in the EU treaty in March next year.
Ich möchte auch Klarheit schaffen, dass für uns als EVP-Fraktion bei diesen Gesprächen die 4 Grundfreiheiten Europas nicht zur Debatte stehen.
And that's all from the Strasbourg session. See you next week in Brussels and find out more about the European Parliament's largest political force by checking out eppgroup.eu. Thanks for watching.